so many realtors don't have the slightest clue what is the lifetime value of a specific client. It doesn't matter how much you make, it's how much you keep at the end of the day. Probably the most important numbers that you should know in your real estate business. One of the things I hear all the time is, man, I made $1 million last year, but I still don't have a pot to piss in. Let me guess, you don't know this. Okay, so what is lifetime value, LTV, or lifetime gross profit, or lifetime net profit of a client? And this really applies to any business in general. There's been a lot of really good videos out there. Alex Hormozi did one just recently as well that I recommend you check out. But I think it's incredibly important, and it's funny that so many realtors don't have the slightest clue on what either their team members, which is probably even more applicable, but what is their lifetime value of a specific client? Have you looked back into your previous client database and said, okay, this client, Johnny, he did one transaction with me. I made $25,000. Johnny is an A-type client. A B-type client might be, and I'm just using numbers, a B-type client might be Susie. Did one transaction and I made $15,000 on it. So that is probably the basic understanding of what 99% of our realtors, or 99.99% of realtors, know about their business. If we want to actually create a business that's repeatable and grows amongst itself, we have to understand the numbers inside and out. So what do I mean by this is, even though Johnny might have done $25,000 transaction, Susie did that $15,000 transaction, but she referred me 6 clients. And out of those 6 clients, I now have made $160,000, right? And I know this sounds simple, but let me ask you this. In the past, how much money, what have you allocated, and how have you figured what would be the best return on your investment to market to people like Susie? How have you changed your ads? Who have you gone in front of? What type of networking events were you a part of? How have you altered your business to attract more Susies? Do we like Johnny? Of course we do. We want to do business with Johnny. I mean, most of the people that Susie referred were Johnnies. But the reality is if I can target, focus my business and understand that if I can create one client that is going to reproduce and give me multiple clients, I can increase my lifetime value of each one of them substantially. And so instead of spending $1,000 on marketing to everybody in general, we can find a way by asking questions, simply ask them, get them to fill out a survey. Hey, Susie, thank you so much. You know, you're one of my top referring clients. I appreciate it so much. Obviously, we're gonna be sending thank you cards every time she sends something. We're gonna send gift cards. We're gonna do all these different types of things to reward it. But ask the questions like, if you don't mind me asking, what makes you refer so well? Like, I genuinely appreciate it and wanna know. And her answers, we're gonna use that to target that market audience. Because remember, there's a small percentile of people that are naturally want to be that person that refers good people. And if we can target that, not only will the lifetime value of our client go up and our business become more profitable, right? Because we're gonna have a much better return on that investment, but we're also gonna have a better understanding of what we need to do to make clients happy. So the first thing I want you guys to do is, and the first thing that I did with my business is I will look back at all the sales that I've done in the past. From that, I'm literally gonna see who's referred from who. And if you aren't tracking these things, I've got another tracking video that I've talked about before, and I will be doing one in depth. It's incredibly important to track all of the information of where your leads came from, what you did to manage them, what they bought, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now that we understand by asking Susie the types of questions we need and how to market that type of audience, we can now invest that money into it. Another number is CAC. We need to know what the cost of the acquisition of a client is. So right now, you may know how much you're paying per lead, but do you know how much you're paying per actual closed transaction? So for example, and this is where sometimes I think people go wrong is, and they make a ton of money, the volume is high, the gross revenue is high, but the net profits are in the red. Is because it doesn't matter how much you make, it's how much you keep at the end of the day. And if we don't understand, I may be able to do 100 transactions, right? But it costs me $10,000 per transaction, I'm still gonna be losing money, right? So I need to know what is the actual cost associated with every single transaction. And I know what you're already thinking as a real estate agent. Well, some come as referrals, some come from online leads, some come from open houses. How do I do that? Well, Two things. A, you need to know your cost per acquisition for each subcategory, or what I would say is know them for at least a general. Online leads, how much do you spend? How much are you getting in return? But then there are going to be parts of your business, the operating expenses that run your business, that you're going to have to factor per transaction. If you have an admin staff, you have marketing staff, Bruce isn't free, unfortunately. Maybe one day. These things are going to be running your business, and you should have a factor of that applied to every single client. So I know, for example, what my average cost, so if my agent does a $10,000 deal, my average cost per transaction is roughly 28% of the total commission value. So my agent's going to get 50%, I get 50%, 28% goes into the cost of doing that. You can do the math. I'm going to be at 22% on the upside, right, for my agent transactions, which for me works great, right? But for you, if you're an individual agent and you're forking out more money than you are receiving in return with your expenses, we need to figure out why and where they're going. So back to understanding what the lifetime value of our clients are, understanding what the costs associated with that is the first part. The second part is, what do we do with this information? Let's say you're selling mobile homes, okay, and your average commission is going to be $5,000. And this is kind of something that we were talking about before. We need to know that we can maximum spend, to make it worthwhile for you, $700 for every single transaction. And now that we know that, because we've walked backwards, learned our lifetime and our cost per acquisition, we can now create a budget that is targeting that specific audience. We've had the feedback from our previous clients. We know what attracts those referral type clients where we can get more money in return, right? On top of this, and this is kind of a little bit of a side note, on top of this, and an important thing is, and we talked about Susie and Johnny before, Susie's the automatic referrer and Johnny isn't, what are you doing and what can you do to turn Johnny more into a Susie? How can we get Johnny to refer? So if you're selling coaching programs, if you're selling cars, for example, you're selling whatever, you can always upsell into another thing. In real estate, you can upsell. You can upsell into an investment property. You can upsell into whatever it is. But how do we create Susies out of Johnnies? Because if our buyer pool is not incentivized, I'll get this word right, incentivized properly, and we don't have the systems in place, then our average lifetime gross profit, lifetime net profit, whatever calculations you're going to be running through, is going to decrease. So we want to, instead of always focusing on where the next lead is and the cost of acquisition, that is part of the plan. That is one major role in our business, is focusing on that. A big portion of where the low-hanging fruit is that none of us really look at is, I already have this database. How do I increase? What do I do? And now that we've asked Susie's what makes her refer, and a lot of it is going to be personality trait, don't get me wrong, but we can take all the prime things, the main motivators that get her into action to refer you other business, we can now apply those using an incentivized program. So, hey, if you refer a client, you get A. If you refer a client, you get B. Even if it's just follow-up drip systems. Did you know that your home increased by $100,000? Please let your friends know if they want to find a realtor that can get you the same kind of purchase and make sure that their net value increases, right? Whatever the pitch may be. The point of the story is we want to focus on these numbers and understand how can every single client in our database be more profitable in the long run, not just off the one transaction. Instead of focusing on the one transaction, more profit, more revenue, more business from a single client, right? Maximizing what is already there. Now, to go back to the cost per acquisition, that will actually start to come down the higher our profitability is per client, right? So they actually work hand in hand. So now we understand some of the basics of the cost of acquisition. We understand that we need to increase the lifetime gross profit, the lifetime net profit, the lifetime value in general of each one of these clients. What are some of the additional things that you can do in your business to increase those numbers? Well, for example, and this is applicable in coaching and everything, simply by targeting clients that are those Susies that we mentioned, those repeatable business, that are going to be selling more expensive properties, higher volume. Because if our base cost is always going to be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 per transaction, $5,000 per transaction, your system, and if you have to pay your admin $100K a year, or if you have to do whatever, it's just the market you're in, you have to understand that, okay, if that's gonna be the case, then really the overall volume doesn't matter, the volume per transaction does, to make sure that you're gonna get your return on investment, right? And a return on time in many cases. Understanding these numbers can help you target the market audience that you need to go against, or go after, I should say, and also understand, possibly like in one of my past videos, understanding your avatar better of where you need to market and prospect to, okay? So this cost of acquisition and the overall lifetime value of your client are absolutely probably the most important numbers that you should know in your real estate business. And if you don't, you're really hoping that your volume will cover your overall monthly net. Anyways, I know this sounds complicated. We had a couple numbers put up here to kind of break down some of those things. In my coaching program, I have a specific way of calculating all of these things. I have an onboarding sheet that allows you to basically go through each one of those. I'm gonna give you guys that onboarding sheet for free. I'm gonna try to get it in my link tree if you wanna download it. I'm hoping it'll be up by the time this video comes up. If not, it'll be the week after. But I think it's really important. The questions in this series of onboarding is going to let you know exactly what you need to know, the numbers that you need to understand to not just create a volume-based business, but to create a business that's profitable. There are a lot of agents I know that make $1 million a year gross and take home a couple $100,000. That is not the point. The point is to make the $1 million and take home the $1 million. Obviously that's not possible, but you know what I'm saying. So if you're looking to understand these numbers and how to generate it properly and create a system that you can actually build your plans around, it's incredibly important. Reach out to me, hit my link tree on my welcome page. Where is it? Bio, thank you. Subscribe, like, and I look forward to talking to you on the next one.